I told her about the date while I was still taking off my coat, and she didn't say anything for a long moment. And then she said, quietly, like she'd been holding it in her mouth for months, "She can't love you like I do." The apartment went very still. I want to tell you about Renata. About the 14 months we lived together, and the thing that had been building in that apartment without my name on it, and the night it finally arrived in the hallway between our 2-bedroom doors. We met through a mutual friend who described her as the most organized person she'd ever known, and was not wrong. Renata had a color-coded calendar on the refrigerator, a specific mug she used only on Sunday mornings, and a way of managing a shared space that made the apartment feel like it had always been in order, even when it hadn't. She was funny and precise, and she noticed things, not in an intrusive way, in the way of someone who is genuinely paying attention to the world and to the people in it. Within 3 months of living together, I considered her one of the closest friends I had. I didn't examine that too carefully. I liked her, and it was easy, and those 2 things felt like enough. The first thing I missed, I think, was the shift in what easy meant. There is normal easy, which is the ease of 2 people whose rhythms have settled into each other comfortably. And then, there is a different kind of easy. The ease of someone who has started organizing their life around yours without saying so, who is available in a way that is slightly beyond the ordinary, who knows what you want before you say it, and finds satisfaction in that knowledge that comes from somewhere more than friendship. Renata had moved into the second kind of easy sometime around month 4. I did not notice it as it happened. I noticed it later, retrospectively, the way you understand the structure of a building by looking at it from outside after you've already spent a year inside. She was there when I got home, not always. She had her own life, her own friends, her own graduate program that kept her busy and stressed and texting me at odd hours about methodology problems I couldn't fully follow, but listened to anyway, because listening to her was easy. But she was there. More than not. And when she was there, the apartment arranged itself around our shared presence in a way that felt like something, without my having decided that it felt like something. She remembered things. This sounds small. It is not small. She remembered that I mentioned a work presentation 3 weeks before it happened, and asked me about it the morning of. She remembered that I didn't like a specific brand of coffee, and quietly stopped buying it. She remembered the name of the ex I'd referenced once in passing 4 months earlier, and never mentioned again, and she brought it up gently in the right context, in a way that showed she had been keeping a careful interior record of me. I let myself be kept track of. It felt like being cared for. And it was being cared for. And the fact that it was also something else was something I was not looking at directly. The date was with a woman named Odalys I'd met at a work event 3 weeks earlier. We'd gotten coffee first, and then a second coffee, and then she'd asked if I wanted to get dinner, and I'd said yes. The dinner was a restaurant, with good lighting, and better wine and conversation that went where conversations go. When 2 people are discovering, they might want to continue discovering each other. I walked home feeling the specific lightness of a good evening that has not yet been named, but is heading somewhere worth naming. Renata was awake. She was on the couch with a book and a mug and the television on low, which was her usual late evening configuration, and she looked up when I came in with an expression I registered as normal and understand now as something she had been managing carefully for a long time. I said the date had gone well. I was still taking off my coat. I was happy and slightly unguarded in the way you are when an evening has been good, and I said more than I might have otherwise. Odalys was smart. The conversation had been easy in the specific way that isn't actually easy, but is work that doesn't feel like work. I thought I wanted to see her again. Renata was quiet through all of it, which was not unusual. She was a good listener, and she listened the way she did everything, with full attention. And then she said it. She can't love you like I do. I stopped. My coat was half off. I turned and looked at her, and she was looking back at me from the couch with the expression of someone who has just stepped off a ledge and is still in the air, not yet certain of what the ground will feel like. She said it again, softer. She doesn't know you. I didn't say anything. I was doing the thing I do when something large arrives, going very still, not out of coldness, but out of the need to understand the actual shape of the thing before I respond to it. Because what she'd said was not a small thing dressed in small words. It was everything she had been not saying for however long she had been not saying it, and it had arrived all at once, and the apartment that had always felt orderly suddenly felt like it had a completely different floor plan than the one I'd been navigating. I finished taking off my coat. I sat down across from her. I said, "How long?" She laughed a little, not unkindly. "How long have I known? Or how long have I been trying not to say it?" I said both. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, doing the arithmetic. She said she'd known since around month 5. She said she'd spent the months after that telling herself it would pass, and then telling herself it wasn't what she thought it was, and then telling herself she could continue indefinitely in the configuration we had without it mattering, and that each of those things had been progressively less true. She had not said anything because she didn't know what saying it would cost, whether it would cost the friendship, the apartment, the easy thing we had, whether I would be kind about it, or whether kindness would be impossible given the nature of what she was saying. I said, "I would always be kind about it." She said, "I know. That's part of what made it harder." We sat with that for a moment. Outside, a car passed. The television was still on low, something neither of us was watching. Then she asked me, directly, which she had always done when the stakes were high enough, "Do you feel anything?" For me, in that way, at all. And I owed her the same directness, which meant I could not be soft about it in a way that would leave room for a hope I couldn't fill. I said, "I love you. I want to be clear about that first, because it's true, and it matters. But I'm not in love with you, and I don't think I will be, and I think you deserve to hear that clearly, rather than gently, because a gentle answer would be a dishonest one." She nodded. Her face did several things. She was extremely good at managing her face, and she managed it now, but I had been watching her face for 14 months, and I could read the seam where the management was working. She said, "Okay." I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Not right now. I will be." We did not resolve everything that night. We stayed up for 2 more hours, talking in the way you talk when you've been forced out of the comfortable abbreviations of a close friendship into the actual full sentences underneath them. And what came out of that conversation was not a plan, but a truth. We had been living in a version of our friendship that was honest for me, and a performance of acceptance for her. And that version needed to change, and neither of us entirely knew yet what it needed to change into. Over the next 3 weeks, things were careful between us. Not cold, careful. The kind of careful that is actually a form of respect, where 2 people are handling something fragile and both know it, and neither pretends otherwise. She went to stay with a friend for a weekend. I called my sister and talked for an hour. We ate dinner together on a Tuesday and talked about her thesis and my work and almost nothing about what had been said. Because some things need to be said once and then quietly integrated rather than turned over and over until they lose their shape. Then she told me she was going to look for a new apartment. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most things, with the information in front of her and her assessment of it clear. She said it wasn't about anger or damage or anything between us being broken. She said she needed to live somewhere that was hers rather than ours. in a space that didn't have 14 months of a feeling she was trying to move through still embedded in its walls. I said, "That makes complete sense." She said, "I think we can stay friends." I said, "I think so too." She said, "I need some time first." I said, "Take it." She found a place within the month, a studio in a neighborhood she liked, closer to her department, with a window she sent me a photo of because the light was good and she knew I would understand why the light mattered. She moved out on a Saturday. I helped her carry boxes because she would have helped me carry boxes, and that part of what we were to each other was unchanged and was not going to change. At the door, when everything was in the moving van, she looked at me with the expression I had learned to read as her actual face rather than the managed one. She said, "I don't regret saying it." I said, "I don't regret how it went." She nodded. She got in the van. I went back inside and stood in the apartment that was now just mine, with the color-coded calendar still on the refrigerator and her specific Sunday mug still in the cabinet because she'd left it. And I understood something I hadn't had the right words for during all the months she'd been keeping a careful interior record of me. Being loved carefully by someone who notices everything is not a small thing, even when you can't answer it the way they need you to. Even when the most honest and loving thing you can do is say clearly that you cannot. What she had given me in 14 months of noticing and remembering and being there was real. The fact that I couldn't give it back in the same form didn't make it less real. It made it, in its own way, one of the most complete things anyone has offered me, and I have not forgotten it, and I don't intend to. Odalise and I went on a third date the following week. I told her, eventually, about Renata. Not all of it, but enough. She listened the way she listened to things, which was carefully and without filling the silence too quickly. Then she said, "She must have trusted you a lot to say it." She was right. And I had not taken it lightly. And I will not. Renata and I texted for the first time 3 months after she moved out. Just something small, an article about a thing we'd both been interested in, sent with no context because no context was needed. She responded with a single word that made me laugh. I sent one back. We have been doing that, slowly and without pressure, ever since. There is something in your memory right now, a moment when someone handed you something true and irreversible that changed the shape of a relationship you thought you understood. A confession, or a silence that finally broke, or a question asked in a hallway that had been waiting in someone's chest for longer than you knew. Have you ever been the person who received it and had to decide in real time what kind of person you were going to be when it landed? Subscribe if you're new. Leave your story in the comments. I read every single one, and the ones you leave have stayed with me longer than I expected.